Welcome to the Vibrant Life podcast. This is the official podcast of the Vibrant Life community, and I'm Sarah Nolan, a burnout prevention and energy management consultant, and I'm here with Laura Di Franco, who is the owner of Brave Healer Productions and a powerhouse who writes to feng shui her soul. Laura's an 8-time published poet and Amazon best-selling author, and an inspirational speaker, holistic physical therapist, and third-degree black belt in Taekwondo with over 2 decades of experience in healing. That's incredible. And she was born to build a revolution of brave healers who are getting their badass, authentic voices published in order to heal the world with their words. So you can find her programs and her podcast, books, and other badassery at bravehealer.com. And she's got some really cool specific things coming up that we'll talk about in a little bit. But first, I wanted, first of all, Laura, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. Did you say burnout specialist in your intro? I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Everybody needs that.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's crazy. And Laura's got a really inspiring story of overcoming that sense of a lack of self-worth, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I feel like just from the people that I've worked with, that is one of the most common, if not the most common things that people are struggling with, but probably don't even know it.
Yeah, no doubt. It is common. It seems very common in women as well, if you wanted to go in that direction. And it's really been sort of the theme of my healing journey for sure.
Yeah. So how did that start? How did the journey start? Like, did you have an awareness of this issue with worth, or was it like an aha moment?
You know, I think as a physical therapist, and especially holistic physical therapist, I got introduced to a lot of amazing out of the box kind of healing modalities early on in my career. How lucky am I, right, to have been pushed in that direction. And so from an early stage, I was realizing that, you know, that feeling that I was after, the happiness feeling, it was going to come from work in all directions and integrating all different kinds of things, not just like feeling better physically, but mentally, emotionally. And it was always sort of, I'd always get shoved in the direction of those thoughts in my head that were like, oh, I'm not good enough, or, you know, and oh my God, you know, achievement and success, achievements became like my drug of choice for that journey.
Yeah.
So I just kept checking off my lists and doing all the things I thought I was supposed to do to feel good, and basically thought that I had everything checked off when, you know, had the great husband with a good paying job and the 2 kids and the dog and the house and the retirement funds. And you know, you guys get it, right? And then I was sitting there not feeling happy still, and like, what the, you know, what is going on with that? So I had to dive deeper on that journey and really figure out, you know, ultimate message for everybody listening is you were born so you're worthy. And even though I think we all know that, there's something that gets in the way of it, right? And I can tell you a really powerful story. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting at my computer on Facebook, and the messenger pinged, and it was a stranger. And the message said, hey, I read something you wrote on one of your blogs. I really loved it, and I've been struggling a little bit. I wonder if you could send me some more things to read. And I was like, of course, you know, I was excited to get the message, and I kind of went away and found a few links for her and dropped them in the messenger. And after a little bit of a conversation, she shared with me that she had been struggling with depression. She was a mom of 5.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I went a step further that day. I actually wrote her a blog and dedicated it to her anonymously. And I asked my audience to step up in the comments with love and support, because I knew I had other healers in my, blog audience. I knew I had moms who had been there. I knew I had people who had struggled with depression and moved through those types of things. So the coolest part is that happened. They stepped up, they, put comments in the blog. And I think she just really started to feel a different kind of hope by reading that. What I didn't know at the time, only learned it later after getting to know her a little bit, was that she had actually been planning this suicide note that she'd write to her husband and 5 children. And she actually went on to writing her first 2 blogs ever. One, a real authentic story about her struggle with depression. And then the second blog was a call out to other mothers. And I had kind of helped her with those blogs. And I swear to you all that if that's the only thing I ever do with my life, it will have been enough. And I kind of woke up that week in that relationship with her and realized my fear of not good enough is frickin' boring. Like, because what if I could do that for somebody? Like, what if I could actually change somebody's life or even save somebody's life? It had never hit me that hard before. And so that's probably, it's still affecting me today. It allows me to wake up every single morning with no excuses.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting. I've had nothing like that specifically, but I have had people come out of the woodwork and say, like, just thank you for continuing to show up.
Yes.
And for somebody like you or I, it's like, you can kind of take it for granted sometimes and realize, it's like, you just don't realize all the time the impact some of this stuff is making.
Well, and that's just it. Like, how lucky am I that I get to tell that story? And sometimes sometimes you don't know because they aren't brave enough to reach out to you or whatever. Like, I would hope for everybody that they would have someone that was brave enough to reach out and tell them, right? But for those of you who haven't heard that yet, it's there, it's happening.
Right.
You are inspiring people, so it's good to remember until you get the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, what I'm curious about is, when you had this realization that, like, you had everything and you still didn't feel good enough, what did you do? What did you decide to do about that?
The biggest thing that I figured out was that I had been pursuing things that were on some sort of weird list of shoulds and supposed tos. Right. And I had been taught certain things were supposed to make me happy. So like I was following along and doing all the things. And I think sitting there finally realizing I still wasn't happy and I had, everything checked off. I really had to figure out what was going on. That aha had more to do with not following my own intuitional messages about what felt good to me. I was just checking off the list, no matter if they were really resonating or not, just thinking they were supposed to make me feel that way when they really weren't.
Right.
That one shift, and listen, it wasn't one day, it was a year's worth of slowly shifting toward what really did feel good. And making decisions, saying no to a lot of things. Getting a divorce was a huge one. Moving toward my business in a way that made me feel really great and passionate. It was so many things along that journey from that first day that I realized.
So what kinds of, you said it was years, right? What kinds of things did you discover as far as tools and processes, and also just about yourself over those years?
That's a big question, right? I think I'm going to chalk it down to, with awareness, we get a choice. So my practice ever since I became a physical therapist, and then especially getting into some of those more holistic modalities, was to practice awareness in all its forms. body awareness, thought awareness, really being an observer of what was going on, mind, body, soul. So I think that as you're on that journey, you know, once you start that journey of awareness, you know, bad news is you really can't go back.
Right.
You know, you keep uncovering new layers of it, and it actually keeps getting better and better and a little more fun. In the beginning, it can be scary to follow some of these, you know, intuitional ideas that like, ooh, I've never done that before, or wow, why does that feel so scary? But it's worth it, right? So the awareness is the biggest thing. It seems like such a simple word and topic, but it's so big. It can mean different things for different people. But enhancing it, I don't like to use the M word, meditation, because I don't like to make people think that you need to sit on a pillow for an hour every single day. That's awesome. But it's really about just the daily mindfulness, being present in your mind body, in everything you do, you know, even active things that you do, conversations that you have. So that's what I was doing during that time, and sort of discovering the next direction I wanted to go in, the next conversation I wanted to have. I was following that intuitional hit, and also something I call purpose-driven fear. Because there's fear, and then there's this other kind of fear that you know you want to be doing this thing, but it scares the crap out of you, you know? And if you can differentiate between the survival kind of fear and the purpose-driven kind of fear, then you can use it as a compass. So I started doing that, and it just, life got interesting.
Yeah, I can see how you would make a lot different choices from having some of those things, like saying no more and setting boundaries. You said you got divorced. Did you have a career change as well?
Well, as a physical therapist, I've been practicing, gosh, it's been about 30 years now. And I have not given that part of me up yet, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I started transitioning into, you know, you mentioned Brave Healer Productions in my bio. And it was a business of being able to help other healers or healthcare practitioners share their stories. I started to realize that there was healing in the story, both for the teller and the receiver.
Right.
And I started getting very, very excited about that. And so I wanted to create a business where I could help other people along the way figure out if they wanted to write their story in the form of a blog or a book, or maybe they wanted to stand on a stage and tell that story for the first time, or, you know, how exciting that is. That is not for sissies. Like, it takes a warrior to be out loud with your story. Exactly. And that part of me got really excited. Like, if I could help other people do that, right, then maybe the gal's name in the story I told you earlier is Shirley. She doesn't mind me talking about her. But maybe I could help you know who your Shirley is. Right? If I could help you do that. So it was a transition to that, and I'm mainly doing that now.
That's awesome. That sounds so fulfilling. Like, that's the soul work.
Yes. Oh yeah.
That's awesome. What are some of or one of the biggest breakthroughs that you had, you know, on your journey, where all of a sudden stuff just started to make sense and you felt like you were making some, you know, you had a big shift?
After that story that I told you about happened, what happened as a result is I got this is going to sound so corny, like from a business standpoint, but I got very clear on ideal client. It's such an overused term, and I actually don't like to talk about it like that. But there is some truth in being really clear about who you are helping, who you want to help. And I got pretty unapologetic about that. And the more clear I got, the more my programs filled. And the more books I sold, and I'm like, whoa, okay, because everyone's so afraid to say no to people.
Right.
And, this, I think from Marie Forleo, I got, if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to nobody.
Right. Yeah.
And so when that thing happened with her, and I really realized that inside of my writing and sharing was this gift I was giving, and I got really, really clear about who I wanted to talk to, with it, everything just kind of started to fall into place, and it made my the strategy for my business and what I really wanted to do, it just made it a lot easier. It's so nice when things can be easy and they don't have to feel like it, difficult all the time or a constant struggle. I'm not telling you I don't work hard, because you'll never find somebody who works harder. But you get the difference, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's that like forced struggle,
Yeah.
where you're just kind of going in circles.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
So cool. So what kinds of, like, I'm just imagining how you must have transformed as a person, finding your worth. And are there any, I know you talked about mindfulness and things like that. Are there any specific practices that or other practices that you've discovered?
Definitely. As you were asking the question, immediately what I was thinking of was like, oh man, I need to talk a little bit about positivity.
Yeah.
And the way that you move into the world with a higher vibe. And that practice alone, like if we weren't going to talk about anything else, that practice is life-changing. It requires the awareness. So awareness is the foundation for absolutely every tool you and I could talk about tonight, right? But with that awareness, then I get to choose. So I'm the one who, people might look at me and just be like, oh, you're so positive all the time, Pollyanna, whatever. And today I'm just like, yeah, I am, but before I would have maybe taken that as an insult or whatever.
Right.
And there's another one too, like, I had a coach, one of my coaches tell me one day, she's like, Laura, it takes a little stamina to roll with you. And at first I was like, I felt like I had been hit in the heart, but later I realized it was a total compliment. And that meant that I was being my authentic, positive, too much self. And hallelujah, after all those years, for me to be able to like be her and not really care what other people thought about it. Right. So kind of getting back to that, the tool is using your awareness to be in expression of your fullest self, whatever that means for you, because for everybody it's a little bit different, right? So yeah. I move through the world with an awareness practice. I think about what I'm feeling. I think about what I'm thinking. I think about the reactions that are brewing inside of me based on everything going on around me. And instead of reacting, I respond these days. And you all can probably understand the power in that. Because if you're constantly reacting to everything, triggered, reacting all over the place, life is not fun in there.
No.
It's not a fun playground to play in, when you're reacting to everything. But when you realize your response is really kind of your only control in this life anyhow, you can have a lot more fun. So I love to talk, and my next book that I'm writing is about this, having fun with your fear.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that and some thoughts about that?
Yeah, in the writing process, because a lot of the books I've written have been about awareness and inner critic messages, the mindset tricks, and especially the mindset you need to move through fear. And so what I found by writing some of those earlier books was that I really enjoyed talking about the fear component specifically. And so I decided that I was going to write an entire book just dedicated to this, moving through the fear and the tips and tricks that I've used. So I'm going to cross my fingers that one is going to be 2020. We'll see.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I feel like one of the most disempowering things that we tend to experience with fear is just like the fear of the fear, or like the shame of the fear or whatever. And so I love, you know, the concept of this book where it can kind of dispel that and show that, you know, it's not actually so scary.
Totally. I mean, what if we could have fun with it? Whoa. Like, can people even wrap their mind around that idea? I hope so. Or I hope at least it makes people curious. Like, oh, there's somebody who's actually using those two words together. Is that even possible? You know? And there's an idea that I absolutely love right now. I'm a little bit addicted to this quote that I heard, and I've been having lots of conversations with people about this. We want to feel confidence, and we want to feel motivated, and we want to feel courageous. And we wait to feel those things before we take action. But the truth is that the action taking alone breeds those things. So everyone is sitting around feeling fear and unmotivated and, you know, not confident, unworthy, whatever. And they're looking for this magical solution to feel those feelings before they take the action they already know they need to take. And really the answer, you guys, I'm giving you the $1 billion answer today. It's just to take the aligned action. You got to feel that feeling, and you have to take the action anyway. And I know you guys have heard this before. You know, we hear it all day long. Oh, feel afraid and do it anyway, you know. But what's it going to take to actually make that happen? So that's part of what this book is, and that is exciting, you know, to teach those tools. And like, I feel like I grab people's hands sometimes and drag them along with me, you know, because like when you figure something out, then you want to tell everybody about it.
Exactly.
And, it's like that.
I'm super excited for that to come out. That's going to be so good. Oh my gosh, there was a question. I had a question for you, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Let's see. You were talking about. Oh yes. So you had mentioned there's a difference between the purpose-driven fear and the like survival fear. I'm curious what your process is for determining, you know, the difference between the two.
The biggest problem is that fear feels like fear. It's that funky, primal, visceral, disgusting, awful feeling that nobody likes to feel, right? And it's natural and normal. And believe me, we all want to have that because it keeps us safe.
Right, yeah.
But the bigger problem is that when we're doing big things in the world, and, you know, part of my mission is to help people be out loud with their story and write it for the first time, possibly speak it out loud for the first time. That takes a lot of courage. And in the meantime, when you haven't done it before, all of that same kinds of fear is coming up. It feels that way. And the way I started to differentiate were several things. It would keep coming up and bugging me. You got to do this. You got it. And it would be like this broken record. And I'd be like, oh, you again. You know, it was almost like the universe was forcing me to deal, because if I tried to stuff it or ignore it, it just wasn't going away. And maybe even better than that, it always had a very excited feeling. So yes, you know, if fear is more negative and anxiety ridden, that's one direction. That's one thing you feel. But if fear is feeling a little bit more exciting, like what if I did this and the result was, you know, like the possibility, that's one way I started to differentiate, right? Now, these differences can be so subtle that I really want to remind people that that's a practice. And I'm going to get back to the idea of the action taking. My middle name is, can I swear on this podcast?
Sure.
Okay. It's Get Shit Done. All right. So that's been my middle name forever. Like, and I don't know how I figured out from a very early age that taking that action, whether or not I made a mistake or had a failure, I just started to reframe those into stepping stones. It was the action that was getting me to the next best step. It was the action that was getting me to the clarity. So even though I would feel the feeling, I would kind of know my goal. And I would know the bigger vision. And now today I have the face of Shirley in front of me every day. So that amplified it times 1,000, because I would feel the feeling, and if I started to like back off or maybe hide or whatever, whatever that reaction was,
right.
she would come up in my, my mind, and I'd be like, oh, get over yourself. Like, go do it. Like, what's the worst case scenario, right? So it was a lot of those different things. I hope those things I said about that make sense.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, get over yourself, just go do it. I've seen, from my experience, that when fear starts to slow me down or slow somebody down, it's kind of a selfish act in a way, not in like a not in like a blaming kind of a way, but if you really look at it, it's like being so self-absorbed that it's like just start doing the thing and start serving, and then all that fear goes away, because you get like into the passion of it, and you get into what it's really about. And it's not about, all the, what if I mess up? What if I don't look good? What if I don't sound good? All those things.
No doubt. You said it when you said serving. So if you can just flip your switch, and that's a term I use as a tool, because mindset is just about in the moment, flipping your switch when you feel like you're headed in the mud pit of depression or not unworthiness or not good enough, fear, doubt, uncertainty, shame, any of the bad ones, right? The moment you have the awareness that you're there, then you've got the opportunity to flip your switch. And if you can flip it to serving, if you can flip it to gratitude or joy or love or any of the super high vibe, emotions, feelings, you win as far as I'm concerned. Like, and sometimes it takes a practice. We're all, I think, on a journey of mastering that flip switching and getting it to be faster.
Right.
Because who wants to spend any time, sunk in the pit, paralyzed in doubt or fear? It's like, and I did. I mean, I would do that for days. I remember on my very first viral blog, oh my God, I was so excited. And then I decided to read the comments.
Oh no.
And one of them, and listen, there were hundreds of beautiful, positive comments. What did I do? I found the one, right? And I spent like a week just very unhappy and like worried about what this person thought and maybe what other people would think of me. Oh my God, what a waste of time that was.
Yeah.
Right. So my tip for bloggers and writers and, either don't read the comments at all, or just remember everyone is in the world with a different filter, and it's not like if you'll get trolls, it's when, so get ready to play big, know that's coming, and don't let anybody compromise your feeling of worthiness. It's, but until you have something happen, a lot of people can tell you that, and it's hard until it happens and you move through it and you figure out your own. So it's like, we all want to tell prospective parents how it is to have a baby, but you know how that goes, right? So there's no way you can tell anybody about pregnancy, childbirth, or parenting until they actually go through it and just have the experience.
One of my favorite examples of what you were talking about, with, just doing it and being like, stuff is going to happen, you're going to have trolls and stuff like that, is recently Elon Musk launched that Cybertruck. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
So it's this kind of depending on when people are watching or listening to this, it's going to be either news or old news, but it's this kind of geometric, kind of crazy looking truck that looks very sci-fi, like something out of Back to the Future. And people railed on him. They made fun of him. They're like, what is this, real? Are you joking? God. And with zero advertising, just putting it out on Twitter or something, they did like 500,000 in the first day or two.
Yes.
With pre-orders. I don't know how many pre-orders they got, but it's like, you
Oh,
know, in that, one of the biggest takeaways for me on that was, you know, it's okay to get like really made fun of. Like, that's not a problem. It's not a
I mean,
bad
that's
thing.
like negative attention is still attention, right?
And it's,
So,
yeah, it's like Seth Godin talks about the purple cow, like being remarkable. And so if
yes,
you're getting remarks and if people are talking about what you're doing, there's going to be both sides to it. For every negative remark, there's probably several other positive remarks that they may or may not just be vocal about it.
definitely. I mean, I've also been coached in that direction where basically, so it's hard. Like, remember in grade school, we thought the rule was to fit in.
Yeah.
So like you wanted to be like everybody else, and then here you are as an adult, and that's getting, you're getting flipped to 180 and you're getting told, well, no, actually you need to stand out and
Right.
that's your superpower, right? But we have to remember that we came from the total opposite teaching.
Yeah.
So it's taking some of us a longer time to realize that our uniqueness is the way to go. In fact, being coached to divide people, to be polarizing is not a bad thing. It means you stand for something, which is what I like to talk about. Like, that means you actually stand for something, and it's
Right.
okay if people disagree. Actually, it's, yeah, like you said, not bad at all.
So what do you stand for?
I stand for a kind of brave authenticity that's vulnerable in the name of healing and helping the world heal. I mean, one person is enough, you guys, and usually that one person needs to be yourself.
Right, yeah.
And so as soon as that happens, the ripple is real. And so I love helping people kind of wake up to that. Like, whoa, okay, I start right here and I make that big transformation and automatically it's rippling out. Yeah.
Now, what changes did you see in your children from the work that you've been doing just with yourself?
That's a great question. I have two teenagers, 17-year-old girl going on 25 and a 19-year-old boy going on 19. And, they had to move through the stages with me, obviously, including a divorce. So they were much older, teenagers still during that divorce, which was just 4 years ago. And I would love to actually ask them that question. And I'm not sure if they're in a place where they would answer it really fully yet.
Right.
But I watched my daughter in particular, and that girl is fearless. And sometimes I look at her age, because I was nowhere fearless at her age of 17. I was so shy, painfully introverted, could not look you in the eye. It was so bad. And so I look at her and I'm just like, whoa, who are you? Whose child are you? But then I look at me and I go, oh.
Right.
So that's like the best way to answer that question. Like, I've watched her grow up. And of course, I've been having that journey all along that I've been talking to, about today. And I do need to remember that part of that amazing, confident, fearless young woman is me modeling some of that healing that needed to happen, and then kind of coming out on the other side of that and being that woman now.
Yeah, so powerful.
Yeah,
So
it is.
powerful.
That's one of the biggest reasons we should do the healing, is because it automatically affects both directions of generation, your children, and sometimes even your parents, although that might feel a little more difficult. But you're of course doing the healing for yourself. But I don't know if you ever talk about that idea of multi-generational trauma and all of that stuff. So we can do that healing with that in mind, I think, too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just I'd imagine for a lot of parents, so the grandparents, that there's a release that happens where, when you and I do the healing, we're able to then release our parents from any attachment or any resentment, or or any kind of emotional attachment that we've been hanging on to. And, there's an element of freedom that comes for the other, for the parents, that comes from that too.
It has to, with that energetic shift that you're talking about. I'm thinking of forgiveness quite a bit as you're talking about that. It's a palpable energetic shift. So of course they're feeling it, whether or not they can verbalize it. Right.
Right.
And it's interesting. It's interesting to know who had parents that were able to have that conversation. Right. So some of us didn't have parents that even were exposed at all to like having conversations like that. And funny enough, I have one sister, and the both of us went into healing and healthcare. So it's just interesting that we chose that journey in our family. And again, just how lucky are we that was what we were doing, what we chose to do, the parents that they say we chose. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is.
What's one client success that you've had recently that really exemplifies the concepts that we've been talking about today, with like building your worth and overcoming, that fear and stuff like that?
Oh, I have more than a handful of women now who have published their very first blog, who have done their first talk to a group and told their authentic story. I'm trying to think of like one great example for you, but I'm lucky enough now that there have been several. I feel like when you model the courage, authenticity, and you're modeling the transparency, and you have somebody watching that, it's a little contagious. And I realize too, that's, I think, another reason I stay brave about sharing, because I know that that's contagious. I know courage is contagious. I also know enthusiasm is massively contagious, right? We all want to feel that. And so some of these women who have, again, maybe published their first blog, I had at least a few get on some major online blog sites with their guest blogs as well. That's pretty darn exciting. Yeah. I've had women who've been on their first podcast and shared a story out loud for the first time, right? So yeah, I know that's not one specific story, but there have been lots of really great ones. It feels so good.
Absolutely. And I can just imagine, the feeling that they have with all those first milestones. I mean, that's such a big deal to get on somebody's podcast for the first time, or do that guest blog for the first time, especially, as somebody who's starting out, where I remember the first YouTube video that I made. Yes. It was like a 12 or 14 minute video, and it probably took me 3 hours to make it. And I just remember being like having stage fright and all these things.
Yes.
And but it was definitely a turning point, because that one just turns into
had one gal, I just literally helped her write her bio. And I know you've met probably many people who have not yet figured out how to claim their expertise.
Yeah.
And so it helped her write that short paragraph. And she was like, I cried when I read this. Like, I finally felt like myself, like, and not afraid to actually express my expertise, my, whatever it was. Like, you see people stand up tall inside of their worthiness for the first time. And yeah, like, it's the best ever.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you said you've got a few things coming up. You have some classes coming up, and I know for, the folks who are listening on the podcast, or if you're listening at a later time, these may not be current, but everybody who's listening or watching today and in the near future, this will be current. So what are some of the classes and workshops you've got coming up?
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me share that. And if you are hearing it in good timing, January of 2020 is going to be the start of my 2 main signature courses. The Brave Healer book writing workshop is 3 days online, and it's really for people who are writing their very first signature nonfiction book. It's, they're calling these kind of business cards on steroids. You want to be able to express who you are, what your story is. Maybe you're teaching a particular technique or tool, whatever you do in the world, and you're getting that out for the first time. And it's a way that you can introduce yourself and your business to the world. So 3-day workshop coming up in the beginning of January. And then the course that started it all back in about 4 or 5 years ago is called Intuitive Writing and Speaking for Healer Entrepreneurs. It's 6 weeks online, and if you're still struggling a little bit with the worthiness thing, that fear of not good enough, you're wanting someone to grab your hand and just say, hey, get over yourself. Like, let's go do this, let's get your message out in a bigger way. That's that course coming up also in January. And for anyone who misses that, they hear this later, I do these courses 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, you'll be able to find the next date round easily.
Beautiful. And they could just find that on your website, right, Laura?
Yep.
What's your website?
It's either lauradifranco.com or bravehealer.com is probably easier to remember.
Yeah.
And there's a workshops tab, so you can just explore. I've got, I produce a podcast as well. If you're a healer wanting to share your message, you can explore the podcast as well.
And is it the Brave Healer podcast?
It is the Brave Healing podcast.
Brave Healing podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's so good. All right, cool.
I just wanted to say that that's such a pay it forward thing for me, because many people like you have given me an opportunity to share. And I so appreciate that. And I really wanted other ways to do that for other people who hadn't had a chance yet, right? Yeah. So, I think you probably really enjoy your podcast as I do. And I just love to kind of pay that forward for people and help them.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I'm going to go check it out too after we get off of this. Let's see. So this all sounds great. And you also had a checklist where people can download from your website.
The checklist. Okay, briefly. You guys, we all want like Oprah to call, right? Mm-hmm. And we would really like that kind of publicity and exposure for our message and for our business. But if you got hit with the publicity today, would you be ready for it? And I've put together a checklist of 10 things every entrepreneur needs to put in place before Oprah calls. So I hope to help you with like kind of a foundation of getting all your systems ready and really get what you need up there before all the people come, right?
You know what I think would be super relevant to a lot of people with this is like you're doing a lot of blogging and a lot of writing. Well, what about when one of those pieces goes viral?
Exactly. A perfect example.
Have all your stuff together, like from your checklist, then you'll be all set. And I would imagine that could create this mental shift for somebody where it's like, okay, I've got it all ready. And all of a sudden they're able to put out work that they subconsciously know they're ready for the world to be exposed to.
You got it. And how did you know that was my example, right? I told you a little bit about that viral blog. Well, that was what motivated me to come up with this for other people.
Right.
I was so not ready. Mm-hmm. I was like, I panicked too. Like I was all over the place trying to fix my opt-ins and do the website stuff and like and I'm like, oh no. So yeah. How did you know?
That's so funny. That's awesome. So for everybody who signs up with Laura to either do coaching or a course, I also have something that I want to give to you as a gift and as like a thank you for, signing up with Laura and for listening to the podcast. And that is a year subscription to the Rejuvenation Club, which is a perfect complement to everything that Laura is doing. And so just let her know that you heard the podcast, and then we can get you hooked up with that.
Yay, awesome.
Yeah, so I can't wait for you guys to start or continue or level up on your healing journey and just start exploring and discovering more aspects of yourself. And Laura is a great resource for all of that. So thank you so much, Laura, for sharing and for being here today.
Thank you so much. That was a really great conversation. Thank you for the way that you do that and for everything you're doing in the world too.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And for everybody who's watching and listening, drop a comment and let us know, what is your number one takeaway from this episode?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day. Talk to you later.